The sun had barely risen over the dusty hills when Mira woke, her small room cold and silent. The wooden floor creaked under her bare feet as she stepped outside, her eyes scanning the empty streets. She lived in a world that seemed too harsh for anyone, but especially for her stepfather. A cruel man with a face carved in anger had no love for her. He had promised her mother that he would protect her. But those promises were lies. Her mother had died when she was very young, leaving Mira alone with the man who called himself her guardian. Every day, he reminded her of her worthlessness, saying she was too wide, too full, too soft to serve any purpose he cared about. Even her own reflection in the cracked mirror seemed to echo his words. She pulled her thin robe tighter around her body, hoping the cold wind would not chill her more than the fear already had. The villagers avoided her home, whispering behind their hands about the girl whose stepfather sold what little she had for drink. Mira knew they judged, but none dared to intervene. Her stepfather's temper was infamous, and anyone who spoke against him disappeared or suffered consequences too cruel to imagine. Yet deep inside, Mira dreamed of a life beyond these walls, a life where she could be free. But freedom seemed impossible. Chained by fear and hopelessness each morning, she carried water from the well, her hands raw and bleeding. While her stepfather laughed at her struggle, he spent hours drinking and counting his gold coins, never once thinking of her hunger or pain. One morning he stumbled into the kitchen, his eyes red and glassy, a bottle in his hand. He laughed a bitter laugh and said, "You are too big to be useful, girl. Too wide and soft to breed or work. Maybe someone else can find a use for you." Mira froze, a cold knot of fear forming in her chest. The words hit her harder than any blow, and she knew what he meant. Her heart pounded as he staggered out the door, leaving her alone with the fear that today might be the day she was sold. She tried to calm herself, thinking of stories her mother once told her, stories of brave humans who helped others. But those stories felt like dreams. Distant and unreachable, the sun climbed higher, and the heat of the day made the wooden walls sweat. Every shadow seemed to hide someone waiting to take her away. Her stepfather returned in the afternoon, laughing with a stranger, a man whose eyes were cold and calculating. He made Mira stand before him, her knees trembling. The stranger examined her with a smirk, and her stomach turned in disgust. Her stepfather held out a small bag of coins. "Take her for a drink," he said. The words pierced her heart like a dagger, and she felt trapped in a nightmare that had become real. Mira thought of running, but the streets were full of people who would stop her. She thought of hiding, but there was nowhere to hide from men who only wanted profit. Fear gripped her like iron chains, yet deep inside a spark of defiance flickered. She would not give up so easily, she told herself. Her mind raced, planning how she could escape, how she could survive this day. The stranger laughed again, unaware of the fire in her eyes. As they stepped outside, the sun blinded her, but she forced herself to walk tall. Every step was heavy with tension, every breath a battle against panic. She could hear the whispers of the villagers, see the shadows of the passers-by, all watching, judging, hoping, ignoring. Mira kept her head down, counting the steps, memorizing the alleyways, imagining a way to slip free. The city beyond seemed like a distant dream, a place where she could breathe without fear. But that dream was far, and the desert of her stepfather's cruelty stretched between her and freedom. Her heart ached, but her mind sharpened. Planning, watching, waiting for the right moment. The day wore on, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the streets. Her stepfather grew louder and more reckless, drinking and laughing, until he finally left her alone with the stranger. Mira's pulse raced, and she clenched her fists, ready to act. Every muscle in her body was tense, every thought focused on survival. The first step toward freedom would be dangerous, and she knew it. But for the first time in her life, she felt the thrill of possibility. She could not stay in this bitter home any longer. She would not be sold or used. As night approached, the air cool and sharp, Mira took a deep breath, ready to make a choice that would change her life forever. The stars above blinked silently, witnessing the first moment of courage in a girl who had been too wide. Too full, too soft. Tonight her life would shift, the chains of fear loosening just enough for her to dream of freedom. The market was alive with noise and color, the sun harsh and burning the dusty streets. Vendors shouted their wares. Alien merchants with glowing eyes waved strange items, and the smell of roasted meat and spices filled the air. Mira's heart pounded as her stepfather dragged her through the crowded square. the bag of coins clutched in his filthy hand. She felt the eyes of strangers on her, some curious, some cruel, and her stomach twisted with fear. He shoved her toward a man with a sharp face and cold eyes, a man who smelled of smoke and iron. "Take her," the stepfather sneered. "For a drink, or for what you want." Mira's hands shook, and her legs felt like lead, but she refused to cry out. She forced herself to stand tall, pretending a strength she did not yet feel. The man circled her slowly, examining her like an object, his eyes calculating. Her pulse raced, each second stretching endlessly. Every breath a struggle. She wanted to scream, to run. But the crowd pressed in, men and aliens watching, their murmurs heavy with judgment. The stranger leaned closer, whispering words she barely heard. "You don't belong here, do you?" Mira's eyes widened, her hope flaring, but doubt crept in. Could she trust this man? A stranger in a world full of predators. Her mind screamed at her to flee, but the paths were blocked, and her stepfather laughed at her fear. He had drunk too much to notice the stranger's calm, calculating presence, and Mira realized she might have a chance. The man finally stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "I will buy her, not for coin, but for something far greater, freedom." Mira blinked, disbelief washing over her, and her heart skipped. Her stepfather barked a laugh, not understanding the words, too drunk to see the truth. The crowd murmured, sensing the tension, and Mira felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. The man reached out a hand, offering a grip that felt solid and real. Mira hesitated, then with a deep breath, placed her hand in his. Immediately she felt a strange sense of safety. Like stepping out of darkness into light, the stepfather roared, "You can't take her, she is mine." But the man stood firm, his voice like steel. "She is hers, not yours." Mira felt fear and hope collide, a whirlwind in her chest, and she pulled herself away. They moved through the crowd quickly, weaving between merchants and watchers. Every step was dangerous, every glance a potential threat. Her stepfather stumbled after them, shouting curses and threats. But the stranger kept his pace calm and deliberate. They reached an alley, narrow and twisting, shadows stretching long in the late afternoon. Mira's heart pounded so loud she thought it would give her away. Her mind raced, thinking of escape routes, hidden doors and rooftops. The stranger, whose name she now learned was Kyle, guided her with confidence. He explained in whispers, "Stay close, do not trust the streets or the eyes that watch." "We must move fast," Mira nodded, trying to steady her breath, her body tense with anticipation. The city beyond the market felt like a world apart. Vibrant yet dangerous, Kale led her through twists and turns, silent corners and abandoned stalls. They passed a group of alien traders who paused, sensing something but did not intervene. Mira realized how small and fragile she was in this new world. Yet the spark of courage burned brighter. She began to trust Kale, not blindly, but with the careful hope of someone who had nowhere else to turn. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner hiding danger. And Mira's senses sharpened. Kale moved with purpose, always scanning, always alert, and Mira tried to mirror his awareness. She realized how much she had been unprepared for the world outside her bitter home. Her stepfather's cruelty had been a cage, but this journey showed her the vastness and danger of freedom. They passed an old bridge over a canal that shimmered with alien light. Mira hesitated, looking down at the water, remembering the stepfather's threats. Kale placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "One step at a time," he said, and Mira followed, trusting him. Her feet felt heavy, yet each step was a victory over fear, over the life she had known. Suddenly a shout rose behind them, her stepfather's voice mixed with curses. Mira's heart leapt, but Kale pushed her forward faster, weaving through the narrow streets. They ducked into a hidden door, a passage Kale seemed to know well. Inside, the air was cool, shadows safe and protective. Mira allowed herself a small breath. Hope glowing in her chest, she realized that today, though filled with fear and uncertainty, was the first day of a new life. She looked at Kale, a mixture of trust and curiosity in her eyes. He gave a small nod, understanding the unspoken question. "We will keep moving," he whispered. "But for now, you are safe." Mira allowed herself a small smile, her body still trembling for the first time. She felt that perhaps the cruel world outside her home could be challenged, and that maybe, just maybe, she could survive. Night had fallen over the alien city, the streets glowing faintly with neon lights. Mira's heart pounded as Kale guided her through narrow alleys, shadows stretching like fingers ready to grab. Every sound made her jump. Every footstep behind them made her stomach twist with fear. She had never run like this before, never felt so alive and terrified at the same time. Her stepfather's betrayal weighed on her mind. But Kale's calm voice reminded her to focus. "Keep moving and do not look back," he whispered. And Mira obeyed, clutching her thin cloak around her. The city was unfamiliar, every turn strange and disorienting. Yet Kale seemed to know each hidden path. They slipped past guards, strange creatures, and merchants who crowded the streets even at this late hour. The hum of neon lights mixed with distant shouts, creating a dangerous symphony. Mira felt her pulse in her throat, but she forced herself to breathe. To think, to survive, they reached the edge of the city, where the buildings ended and the desert began. The wind whipped sand into their faces, and the stars above looked cold and distant. Kyle scanned the horizon, eyes sharp, lips pressed tight. "This way," he said, pointing toward a narrow canyon that cut through the hills. Mira followed, every step painful from exhaustion, yet driven by hope. She realized how much courage it took to escape, how fragile life could be when the world was against you. Strange creatures of the desert watched from the shadows, glowing eyes reflecting the moonlight. Mira shivered, but Kale's presence steadied her, and she learned to move silently. Every rustle of the sand, every whisper of wind felt like a threat. Yet there was beauty in the darkness too, a quiet promise that freedom might exist beyond fear. Hours passed as they moved through the canyon. The walls high and jagged, Mira's legs ached. Her hands scraped from rocks, yet she did not stop. Kale occasionally looked back, scanning for pursuit, and Mira learned to trust his instincts. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words were calm and measured, giving her strength. "The world is bigger than your fear," he said, "and your courage is stronger than you think." Mira clung to his words, imagining the life she could have if she survived this night. The stars above seemed to guide them, distant beacons in the endless dark. At one point they hid in a small cave, walls cold and damp. Mira leaned against the stone, breathing heavily, listening to the desert sounds outside. Kale crouched beside her, eyes alert, hands ready to defend. The night stretched long, yet she felt a strange sense of safety in the small shelter. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future without fear. But danger was never far, and Mira knew it. The desert was home to predators, both human and alien. Every shadow could hide someone sent by her stepfather. Every rustle could mean death. She pressed closer to Kale, finding comfort in his steady presence. He handed her a small pouch of dried food and water, and she ate with trembling hands. Her mind wandered to her past, to the bitter home she had escaped. She thought of her stepfather's cruel laugh, the way he had counted coins while selling her for a drink. Anger and sorrow mixed with fear, creating a fire inside her that she had never felt before. Kale watched silently, understanding the storm inside her, yet allowing her to feel. He knew that survival was not just physical, but also about learning to trust, to hope, to fight. As the night deepened, Mira noticed the desert stars shifting, and she realized they had walked far from the city. The air grew colder yet clearer, the silence broken only by the distant howl of creatures. Her muscles ached, her throat was dry, but she felt alive in a way she never had. Every step forward was a rebellion against the cruel world she had known. Kale finally spoke. "Soon we will reach a safe place, but we must remain careful. The journey is far from over, and your courage will be tested." Mira nodded. Feeling a mix of fear and determination, she had survived the bitter home, escaped the market, and now faced the unknown. Yet she refused to be broken, refused to be sold, refused to be powerless. Hours turned into a restless dawn, the first light brushing the canyon walls with pale colors. Mira's eyes widened as she saw distant shapes moving, strange structures rising from the desert sands. Kale whispered, "That is where we are headed. A place where you can rest and plan your next move." Her heart lifted, hope blooming like a fragile flower in the harsh desert. She realized that each step, each choice, had brought her closer to freedom. Her body ached, her mind raced, yet her spirit burned brightly. The unknown was terrifying, yet it held promise. For the first time, Mira felt that the world beyond her stepfather's cruelty might belong to her too. And with Kale beside her, she would face it, step by step, shadow by shadow. Tonight, the desert had become both a prison and a teacher. showing her that courage could carry her farther than fear ever could. The desert stretched behind them, endless and silent. As Mira and Kale approached the glowing towers of the alien city, Mira's eyes widened in wonder and fear, the city alive with light, movement, and sounds unlike anything she had ever known. Creatures of all shapes and sizes walked the streets, some tall with shining skin, others small and quick. Strange machines floated above the avenues, humming with a quiet energy. The walls glimmered with neon symbols, shifting colors and patterns that seemed almost alive. Mira felt both excitement and unease. The alien world thrilling yet dangerous. Kale led her through the gates. His steps steady, his eyes alert, he whispered, "Stay close, Mira, the city is beautiful, but it is full of hidden dangers." She nodded, gripping the folds of her cloak tightly. Her heart pounded as they passed merchants selling glowing fruits, floating devices and strange fabrics everywhere. She could feel the eyes of others, curious and wary. Some stared openly, while others disappeared into shadows before she could see them clearly. Mira realized that this city was alive in a way her old home never had. It breathed, moved, and judged, and she had to learn quickly how to survive here. They turned into a narrow alley. Far from the main streets here, the light was dim, but Mira could see others like her, young humans and aliens hiding from those who had hurt them. Kale introduced her to a few, explaining quietly, "These are people who have been sold, abandoned or hunted. They found safety here, and now they help others survive." Mira's heart lifted, a spark of hope glimmering in her chest. For the first time, she saw others who understood fear. Pain and courage, they welcomed her cautiously, asking questions yet offering comfort. A young alien boy handed her a small cup of water, his eyes reflecting trust and understanding. Mira felt tears prick her eyes, emotions she had buried for so long stirring inside her. She realized she was not alone, and that maybe, just maybe, she could belong somewhere. But even in this sanctuary, danger was never far. Kale explained that her stepfather had enemies, traitors who might pursue her. The city had rules, hidden paths, and guardians who kept watch for threats. Mira had to learn fast how to move, how to hide, how to trust. Her body, once mocked for being too wide, too full, too soft, began to feel strong, capable. She trained quietly with Kyle, learning to move silently, defend herself and sense danger. The city itself became a teacher, every corner a lesson in survival. At night, Mira watched the towers glow, lights flickering like distant stars. She imagined a life beyond fear, a life where she could choose her own path. But shadows lurked, and she knew that freedom would not come without challenge. The walls of the city held secrets, some kind, some cruel, and Mira had to discover which were which. One evening, while walking through a crowded market, Mira spotted a figure that froze her blood. A man with her stepfather's cruel eyes. Lurking near the edge of the crowd, Kale noticed immediately, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Stay calm," he whispered, his voice firm. "Do not let him see fear." Mira's mind raced, heart pounding, every instinct screaming danger. They ducked into a side street, twisting through corridors and hidden doors known only to Kyle. Her body trembled, but her spirit burned with determination. She realized that every step, every choice, was part of the fight for her life, even in the alien city. She could not forget the bitter home she had escaped. Her past shadowed her, but the future stretched wide before her, filled with danger and possibility. The next days passed with lessons in trust, observation, and courage. Mira learned to read expressions, notice movements, and sense the intentions of those around her. Kale taught her to speak cautiously, to ask questions, and to act only when necessary. She met others who had escaped cruel hands, sharing stories, advice, and strength. Her confidence grew, and she began to feel a part of something bigger than herself. Her body, once seen as a weakness, became a symbol of resilience. She moved through the streets with new awareness, noticing hidden paths, quiet spaces, and potential allies. Even the city itself seemed to acknowledge her presence, its neon glow reflecting her courage. Mira understood that she was learning not just to survive, but to thrive, to take control of her life, her choices, and her future. Yet, the fear of pursuit never left her entirely. Every shadow could hide danger. Every whisper could signal threat. The alien city was beautiful, strange, and dangerous, but Mira knew she could face it step by step, heart steady, mind sharp. For the first time in her life, she felt she could truly fight back. As night fell once more, Mira stood on a high balcony, looking at the vast city stretching beneath her. Lights flickered, Creatures moved and the hum of energy filled the air. She felt the weight of her journey so far, the pain, fear, and courage all mixing inside her. Beside her, Kale watched silently, a reminder that she was not alone. Mira closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She knew the journey was far from over. Yet the alien city had given her strength. Her heart beat with resolve. Her mind sharpened with lessons, and in that moment, she realized that she could face the unknown. For the first time, the vast, dangerous universe seemed full of possibility. Not just threat, but adventure, challenge, and hope. Mira spent her days moving quietly through the alien city, learning its hidden corners and secret paths. Each alley, each building, each flicker of neon light seemed to whisper lessons about survival. Kale watched her carefully, his eyes always scanning the streets. He knew that danger could come from anywhere, from humans or aliens, friend or foe. Yet Mira felt a spark of curiosity that could not be dimmed. She began asking questions about the city, its people and its past. Kale answered cautiously, giving her small pieces of knowledge. He taught her that the city had been a refuge for those abandoned, sold or hunted, that some people here were fighters, others were scholars, and many simply survived. Mira listened intently, absorbing every word, her mind alive with wonder. The more she learned, the more she realized she had been trapped in a small, cruel world before. The bitter home, the stepfather, the market sale, all had been only part of a much larger universe. One night, while hiding in a quiet corner of a marketplace, Mira overheard a conversation. Two alien traders spoke in low tones, their voices urgent but filled with fear. They mentioned her stepfather, a betrayal, and something called the Council of Traders. Mira's heart raced, and she motioned for Kale to come closer. He listened silently, then looked at her, eyes dark, thoughtful. "This city hides many truths," he whispered, "and you are tied to some of them, whether you know it or not." Mira felt a shiver run down her spine, her mind spinning. What secrets had her mother left behind? What promises had been broken? And why had her stepfather betrayed them all for greed? Kale explained that her mother had been part of a resistance, fighting against cruel traders and slavers. Her stepfather had once been a member too, but he had chosen selfishness over justice. Mira's chest tightened as she realized the weight of her family's past. Her mother's courage, her stepfather's betrayal, and now, her own fight for survival. It was as if destiny had placed her in the alien city not by chance, but for a purpose. Over the next days, Mira began searching for clues about her mother's past. Kale guided her carefully, teaching her to move quietly, observe, and question without drawing attention. They found hidden messages in old buildings, symbols carved into walls, and letters that had survived the years. Each piece told a story of courage, betrayal, and hope. Mira realized that her body, once mocked as weak, held strength and purpose beyond what she had imagined. The traders and outcasts in the city respected her not for beauty or size, but for courage and determination. She learned to see herself as more than a victim, more than a girl sold for a drink. Her mother's legacy became a beacon in her mind, guiding her steps, shaping her choices. She understood that survival was not just about running, hiding or fighting, but about knowledge, courage, and alliances. One evening, Kale brought her to an ancient library hidden beneath the city. Its walls were lined with glowing texts, alien scripts, and human records. Mira ran her fingers along the shelves, awe and curiosity filling her mind. Here were the secrets of the city, the stories of those who had fought injustice and the strategies of resistance. Kyle explained that her mother had left messages for those brave enough to find them. Mira felt a mix of sorrow and pride, imagining the woman who had given her life for courage and hope. The letters spoke of betrayal by trusted allies, warnings about greed, and the promise that some humans and aliens could be trusted. Mira absorbed every word, feeling herself grow stronger, sharper, more determined. She realized that knowledge was a weapon, and she now wielded it carefully. But even as secrets were revealed, danger lingered. Whispers of her stepfather's pursuit reached the city, and Mira knew that he had not forgotten her. Traders and mercenaries searched the outskirts, looking for any trace of the girl he had once tried to sell. Mira's courage was tested as she planned, observed, and acted with precision. Every encounter in the city became a lesson in trust, vigilance, and survival. Her body, once scorned, became a tool of strength, endurance, and resilience. She moved through crowded streets, shadowed alleys, and hidden corridors, learning who to trust, who to avoid. and how to use her intelligence to protect herself and others. One day, Mira uncovered a hidden message left by her mother, sealed in a small container under the city. It spoke directly to her, reminding her that courage was the key to freedom, that fear could be transformed into strength. Mira felt tears fill her eyes, but they were not tears of weakness. They were tears of resolve, of understanding, of a young girl stepping into the role her mother had once held. She realized that the alien city was not just a refuge, but a training ground, a place where she could learn to survive, to fight and to reclaim her life. Kale watched her quietly, knowing that Mira was no longer the frightened girl he had found in the market. She had become a fighter, a thinker, a survivor. And though the city was vast, strange and dangerous, Mira knew she could face it. She knew that secrets revealed were not burdens but tools, and that with courage, knowledge, and determination, she could change her fate. The city had fallen into a quiet tension, the neon lights glowing dimly as Mira and Kale moved through shadowed streets. Every step they took was measured, cautious, their senses alert. They knew her stepfather was near, his mercenaries tracking them relentlessly. The air felt heavy with anticipation, the smell of smoke and dust mixing with fear. Mira's heart pounded, not from exhaustion, but from the knowledge that her past had caught up to her. Kale whispered, "Tonight we face him, but stay calm and trust your instincts." Mira nodded, her hands trembling, her mind racing with thoughts of courage and survival. She had trained, learned, and planned, yet the reality of confrontation was different, terrifying and immediate. Through narrow alleys and hidden passages, they approached the old warehouse at the city's edge. Shadows shifted around them, figures watching, waiting. Her stepfather's men were there, a dozen strong, armed and dangerous. Mira felt a cold fire ignite in her chest. She could no longer be a victim, could no longer be sold, could no longer be powerless. Kale led her behind cover. Whispering instructions, she listened intently, every word sharpening her focus, every movement preparing her for the fight. Suddenly, her stepfather stepped into view, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "You thought you could escape me?" he growled, voice echoing off the walls. Mira's heart leapt, fear mixing with anger. The mercenaries closed in, weapons glinting under the dim light. Kale moved first, engaging the nearest attacker. His strikes precise, silent, deadly. Mira watched, absorbing every move, remembering every lesson. Her stepfather laughed, confident that his power would crush them both. But Mira was no longer a child of fear. Her mind was sharp, her body ready, her courage a shield stronger than any weapon. She stepped out from behind the cover, her voice steady. "Stop!" she demanded. Her stepfather froze, surprised by her defiance. "You cannot control me anymore," she continued, eyes blazing. "I am not yours to sell to fear or to command." The mercenaries hesitated, sensing the change, sensing the strength emanating from Mira. Her stepfather's smile faltered, his arrogance clashing with the courage of the girl he had tried to break. Kale fought expertly beside her, but Mira realized she did not need protection this time. Her body, once scorned as weak and soft, moved with power, speed, and determination. She dodged attacks, used the environment, led the mercenaries into traps and shadows. Every step was a lesson, every move a reclaiming of her life. Her stepfather roared in frustration, stepping closer, his weapon raised. Mira's breath was steady, her mind clear. "You betrayed your promises," she said, voice cold, cutting. "You destroyed what you said you would protect." The words struck deeper than any blade, and she saw hesitation in his eyes, a crack in his confidence. Kale watched, ready to assist, but Mira moved forward, confronting the man who had sold her for a drink. Her courage radiated, a force that no coin, no threat, no cruelty could overpower. The mercenaries faltered, unsure of who to follow. Mira's voice grew louder, commanding, defiant. "You have no power over me, no hold, no right," she said. And the words carried through the empty warehouse. Her stepfather's arrogance crumbled, replaced by fear and disbelief. The final moments were tense. Each movement, each glance, each breath critical. Mira lunged, not with anger, but with precision, disarming her stepfather. The mercenaries froze. Unsure whether to attack or retreat, Kale stepped forward, ready to strike anyone who moved against her. Her stepfather fell to his knees, defeated not by strength alone, but by the courage and determination of a girl he had underestimated. Mira's chest heaved, adrenaline and relief mixing. She realized she had reclaimed her life, her freedom, her dignity. The shadows that had haunted her since childhood began to lift. Even the city seemed to acknowledge her triumph, the neon lights glowing brighter. Her stepfather's threats were broken, his power gone, and Mira knew that nothing could force her back into fear or obedience. As the dawn approached, Mira stood tall, looking at the man who had caused so much pain. Her body, her mind, and her courage were united. Kyle stood beside her, silent but proud, knowing that Mira had grown beyond what he had expected. The mercenaries either fled or surrendered, realizing their power was meaningless against someone who refused to be controlled. Mira's heart calmed, the tension of years of fear finally releasing. She looked out at the city, the streets full of life and danger, and felt a new sense of purpose. She had faced the cruelest part of her past and emerged victorious. Her stepfather was defeated, but her journey was not over. The universe was vast, filled with dangers, mysteries, and adventures, yet Mira now knew she had the strength, courage, and knowledge to face whatever came next. Tonight she had fought for her life, and in doing so, she had discovered the true power within her. The confrontation was over, but the story of her courage, determination, and freedom had only just begun. The first light of dawn spread slowly across the alien city, casting soft shadows on streets that had once been filled with fear. Mira stood on a high balcony, her chest heaving with exhaustion and triumph. Below, the city moved quietly, unaware of the battles that had raged in its hidden corners. For the first time, Mira felt truly free. Her stepfather was defeated, his cruelty powerless against her courage. The mercenaries who had followed him had fled or surrendered, and she could finally breathe without the weight of fear pressing on her shoulders. Kale stood beside her, silent and steady, a quiet reminder that she was not alone. He had guided her, protected her, and taught her. But now Mira realized that the strength she felt came from within herself. She had survived the bitter home, the market sale, the chase through the desert, and the confrontation. Each trial had forged her into someone stronger, wiser and more determined. Her body, once mocked as weak, too wide, too full, too soft, now carried the proof of her endurance and resilience. She could feel it in every step, every breath, every heartbeat. She had claimed her life, her freedom, and her future. As she looked over the city, Mira remembered the people she had met in the alleys and hidden quarters, the outcasts, the traitors, the aliens and humans who had survived cruel hands. She realized that freedom was not just for herself. It was a responsibility to help those who could not fight for themselves. The spark of courage within her now extended beyond her own survival. She began to imagine a new life, not just for her, but for everyone trapped by fear and cruelty. Her mother's legacy of courage and resistance flowed through her, guiding her choices, shaping her path, and giving her a purpose greater than she had ever known. The city itself seemed alive with possibility. Mira explored hidden streets, learned new skills, and discovered allies who would stand with her. Kale taught her to navigate the world beyond survival, to understand strategy, trust, and leadership. She learned to read intentions, detect danger, and find opportunity in chaos. Her confidence grew, her mind sharpened, and her heart filled with hope. No longer the frightened girl who had been sold for a drink, she became a symbol of courage and determination. The streets that had once seemed dangerous now became a playground for her strength. Every shadow, every alley, every hidden passage was a test and a lesson. She moved through them with awareness, purpose, and a growing sense of mastery. One evening, Mira found a quiet terrace overlooking the city. The wind warm against her face, she thought of her past, her mother, her stepfather, the desert, and the hidden alleyways. Every memory was a piece of her story, a chapter that had led her to this moment. She realized that survival had been only the first step. Now she could choose her destiny, shape her life, and make decisions for herself. Her courage had opened doors. Her determination had cleared paths. She knew that the universe was vast, full of dangers, mysteries, and adventures. But for the first time, it felt like a place she could belong. Not just a world to fear, but a world to explore. Understand and influence, the city's inhabitants began to recognize her presence, her actions, and her bravery. Those who had been lost or abandoned started to seek her guidance. Mira became a quiet leader, respected not for size, beauty, or power, but for courage, intelligence, and compassion. She trained others in survival, strategy, and courage, sharing the lessons she had learned through trials. Her story spread quietly through the city, a tale of hope and resilience. Even those far beyond the city's walls heard whispers of the girl who had escaped cruelty and faced her fears. She realized that freedom was not simply the absence of fear. It was the ability to act with courage, to protect others, and to embrace the unknown. Days turned into weeks, and Mira's life became a rhythm of learning, teaching, and exploring. Her bond with Cale grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. He no longer needed to guide her constantly, but remained a steadfast ally. Together they discovered new paths, helped those in danger, and prepared for challenges yet to come. Mira knew that her journey was far from over, yet she no longer feared the unknown. The universe was vast, but so was her courage. She had transformed from a frightened girl into a leader, a fighter, and a symbol of hope. The bitter home, the stepfather, the market sale, all of it had shaped her. But none of it could define her. Mira had claimed her life, her freedom, and her destiny. As the twin moons rose over the city, casting silver light across the streets, Mira stood tall on the terrace. Her eyes glimmered with determination, hope, and a quiet joy. She had survived, fought and conquered, and now she could live not as a victim, but as a hero of her own story. Her courage would guide her, her knowledge would protect her, and her heart would lead her. The universe was vast and full of challenges, but Mira was ready. For the first time, she felt truly alive, free, and unstoppable. Her life was hers to command, her story hers to write, and she would face every new dawn with the courage of a girl who had survived the worst and risen stronger.